Britain is still supporting Israel despite renewed violence in the occupied territories. Amnesty International issued a damning report last week accusing Israel of war crimes in Gaza, but it seems to have had little impact on our government. That's despite nearly 20,000 homes destroyed and 13,000 Palestinians killed or wounded over the summer. So what did the parliamentary vote to recognize Palestine actually mean? Joining me now in the studio is former US Marine, political analyst and activist Ken O'Keefe. Welcome, Ken, to Going Underground. The British MPs that we've been talking to, so proud that finally Palestine has been recognized in the House of Commons. There's more to this.
Well, the first thing I would say to people who really genuinely care about justice for Palestine is, why would anybody think that Western leaders have the best interests of Palestine at heart? Every Western leader you can name, almost without exception, has supported the so-called two-state solution. Isn't that a red flag in itself? And I'll certainly make an argument as to why it's not a good thing for the Palestinians.
Now, the one-state solution hardly gets any airtime at the moment. So just describe why the two-state solution, which in this country dominates all political debate about Palestine, isn't the one forward.
Well, let me pause at this first. Let us suggest that instead of South Africa being one state, democratic, with everyone having equal rights, that the black South Africans got, say, 20% or 15% of South Africa and the apartheid system remained. Would that have been a good thing? Why would we suggest that today a two-state solution, which effectively would be the same thing, maintaining an apartheid Jewish supremacist state alongside an inferior, totally economically, militarily submissive state, which is only one false flag operation away from being pummeled? And if we look at the false flag history of Israel, whether it's the bombing of the King David Hotel, or whether it's the Lavon affair, or the USS Liberty, or indeed 9/11, which has Mossad fingerprints all over it.
I've seen people proudly wear their pins in Parliament with the Palestine flag, saying the two-state one is the only solution. Why do you think they don't seem to understand? They sometimes compare it to South Africa, the situation in occupied Palestine or Israel. Why don't they understand that?
I can't answer for stupidity, but there are plenty of stupid people, whether they be Palestinian, whether they be Western, or any other
These are
such.
British politicians in the House of Commons, very pro-Palestinian, considered as being pro-Palestinian.
Well, let's see. The 1948 creation of Israel was on the back of the theft of Palestinian land. Enshrined in international law, UN Resolution 142, is the right of return. Any two-state deal inherently will include the denial of that right of return. I have family members who lost land in 1948, who have beautiful land in Jaffa, which is now Israel. Should they be denied their rights? Should they not be compensated? Should they not have access to the land? I don't think that's just at all. I can understand why the Palestinians would support it, if they truly want to support it, because they've been beaten down so badly for so many decades that perhaps they think that is the very best they can get. But for me, I'm not for whatever people think is pragmatic. I'm for justice. And to me, justice means justice, not some perverted, watered down, you get a paltry amount of land while the behemoth state of Israel continues.
We have a map of the shrinking state of Palestine up there. Well, then why was even this small concession, as maybe you would put it, or maybe it's an irrelevance, the vote on Palestine in the House of Commons, caused the British ambassador to Israel, Matthew Gould, saying, look, policy will remain the same, as if he had to reassure Tel Aviv. Indeed. Does that mean the vote was relevant?
Well, let's look at the history. It's very, very clear. Whether it's the Balfour Declaration and promises to help form a Jewish state, which did not consult the Palestinians at all, the British mandate walking out after the bombing of the King David Hotel, or even universal jurisdiction in this country, which largely at the behest of Israel has been effectively destroyed so that war criminals from Israel can come into the UK quite happily and be protected. All of this is very consistent. The British government has never and will never support justice for Palestinians, and I just don't understand how anybody can't see that.
Well, I have to, give some support to our forlorn MPs, as you put it. There was reaction in the Knesset. They said the British Parliament is encouraging terrorism and somewhat bizarrely encouraging the democratic authorities in Gaza, i.e. Hamas.
Yes. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, we used to call Nelson Mandela a terrorist as well. Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan very famously said that. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. That's pretty clear.
Do you see the British position as that settlement building is part and parcel of the way life exists in the Middle East?
It's shallow talk. The UK and the EU are doing roughly 30 billion euros a year in trade with Israel. Why aren't there sanctions against Israel? Israel has a nuclear weapons program to the tune of about 200 to 400 nuclear weapons, and some officials within Israel have threatened to use those weapons if their existence is threatened. Now, let's add that to the fact that Henry Kissinger and even the CIA have said that Israel will be no more in a short order. Is Israel actually going to carry through that threat? Well, they certainly have the means to do so. Has the British government done anything in any real substance to help the people of Palestine? No, they haven't. They've talked pretty words time and time again, but when it comes to actually doing something, no way will they do anything.
So what should a UK government be doing immediately if you were advising the Foreign Office?
Sanctioning Israel, cutting off all arms sales. Are you kidding me? We're giving arms technology to this state, which is killing Palestinians. It exterminated 92 families, entire families, in this latest mass murder in Gaza. What a disgrace that the British government continues to give technology to these people, which are committing the most atrocious of crimes against the Palestinians. Cut off all arms. Sanction that country, stop trade until it allows Gaza to be able to live a decent life, for the people of Gaza to be able to travel, trade, and ultimately stand on their own 2 feet. Aid is not the answer as well. People need to be very aware of the fact that aid is nothing more than a form of infiltration and subversion for most of the so-called aid agencies.
What does our coalition government get out of de facto defending the killing?
Well, they don't really get anything other than maintaining their position as bought and paid for puppets of the powers that be, those who control the money supply. They're carrying out the orders, so they will continue to get the favor of those who run the world.
But privately, they do say they do care about the plight of Palestinians. It's as if there's something stopping them.
I'm sure many of these politicians, and this is well known in the U.S. as well, but many in England as well, will acknowledge secretly, or at least quietly, that they really resent having to kowtow to Israel on every level. But the bottom line is politics is run by money, and those who have an infinite supply of money effectively run politics. So these people, whether they like it or not, are largely beholden. There are some exceptions. There are some notable exceptions. There are some people of honor within the parliament, but very, very few.
Now, you've been covering this story, as it were, as an activist. I remember the Mavi Marmara, the brutal killing of activists trying to break the blockade of Gaza. At the moment, do you see Britain continuing to support Israel, with certainly in terms of trade and selling weapons, even after the summer of killing?
Israel is living on borrowed time. I have no doubt of this. The people will dictate the terms eventually. Right now, however, they don't fully realize the power they have. The only reason why the policy is changing at all, and that the kind of statements that we're hearing from Parliament and the US Congress and whatnot are changing a bit, is because too many people are aware of the bloodbath that is happening in Palestine on a regular basis, and the horrendous crimes that have been covered up for decades, because this has been happening the whole time. Those things are coming to light, and that's making it politically untenable for these puppets, if you ask me, to maintain their position. So they have to speak in a more frank and honest way. But the substance of who they are and who they work for has not changed.
Ken O'Keefe, thank you.
Thank you, brother.